Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for our November 15th special and closed council meeting. I call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. and I'm looking for adoption of the special meeting agenda. Is there any questions? If not, an adoption. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that we adopt the special agenda for today's council meeting, Wednesday, November 15th at 9 a.m.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blatz, and I will call for the motion. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Item 3A will be the 2024 operation and capital budget discussion, and I will move it over to CAO Williams. Thank you.
There we go. Got it. Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just going to open my note here if you give me one moment, and I guess I shall also scroll here because I am multitasked. That's not a word. Okay, so as reference to council and communication, we're going to start our first budget meeting looking at capital. Usually operating comes first, but as we need a bit more direction in today's closed session, we'll consider the capital budget. So the total capital budget being presented today to council totals $3.4 million, which compared to last year is about a $4.5 million difference to the negative. Last year, obviously, we had the projects such as the Olds Aquatic Center retrofit, a deep servicing replacement, and several playgrounds and outdoor rinks to finish off. So that's the bulk of the rationale for the reduced ask. With capital funding, that we'll get into this a bit, but that is certainly one of our larger challenges that, as you'll see, our MSI funding, which is soon to become Local Government Fiscal Framework Funding, LGFF, is around $1 million this year received from the province, or projected for 2024, and that is roughly $1 million difference from 5 to 8 years ago. Fortunately, the federal gas tax still remains strong, and funding is up for renewal next year, but not expecting huge changes for that, and that accounts for about $500,000 of our total capital funding. So, to start, I will bring up the PowerPoint that was sent to you. And Marcy, where's that located at? Oh, perfect. There we go. Okay. So this doesn't deal with capital precisely, but certainly touches on everything financial. And feel free to interrupt me. I'll try to go through this fairly quickly, as I don't think it's a lot of new information. This was presented last year to council in a similar format. So looking at the strategic plan, we tried to capture, well, not just what the goals are, but what progress we felt has been made by council administration in the last year, and highlight a few items coming forward to continue focus on the four main priorities coming out of the strat plan. Our financial risks and challenges remain the same as presented last year. Obviously, our debt capacity is around that 90% utilization mark, large part because of the guarantees we're making on behalf of ONET, and we don't see significant servicing reductions on our own side until 2027. Financial pressures, as was mentioned, no shortage of times in regular council meetings and elsewhere. We are subject to inflation, the same inflationary pressures that households and businesses are also affected by right now. A revenue decline, as mentioned in both the last mention of capital funding, but also in our taxation, certainly with Sundial about to come offline in 2024. And then increasing service needs and expectations, whether that be expectations of residents or council, or the increasing needs to service our infrastructure that gets older and takes more TLC to make operate. And infrastructure needs. Our water loss in I&Is is projected to reach $2 million by the end of this year. our limited staff capacity to carry out the service levels that we've traditionally done, and as just mentioned, continue to rise. And then the minimal preventative maintenance of core assets, and that's what our service level review has been focusing on, and certainly some direction council has given to me around strategic reserve building and trying to understand the true cost of ownership plus what we should be putting away for proper care and maintenance of what we refer to as our tangible capital assets, roads, facilities, pipes, parks, and the like. So our comparative summary, this is, I believe, 7 like-sized municipalities from various parts of Alberta. This information is publicly available on the province's website for municipal affairs, and it's taken largely from financial statements of 2022 for these 7 municipalities plus our own, and the tax rate bylaws from 2023. Obviously, benchmarking does not mean it's 100% accurate, but I believe it is largely accurate. So I guess a better term is precision versus accuracy. That you can't take this to court, but certainly can identify, I believe, trends, especially as we start to build this benchmark going forward, now in year 2. So as you can see, Old's just a little bit larger in population average and a whole lot larger in assessment. And our assessment has grown about $200 million in the last 2 years, just through largely inflation alone. So it's not quite as lucrative as it seems. So start assets and liabilities. Tangible capital assets, which I just mentioned. How do we compare? The average of the value of all assets owned by these 7 is $225 million. Old's $171 million. That can mean one of 2 things, in my opinion. Either that the assets we own are aged further than assets of the average 7, or other towns have more assets than us and therefore a higher TCA valuation. I'm going to go with the former guess if I had to. I think Olds has plenty of assets, but perhaps ours are aging a bit more rapidly than others. Reserves, mixture of operating and capital reserves. The average is 22.8, we're at 13.9. So obviously not where we want to be, and certainly something council recognizes. Long-term debt, again, never a shortage of conversation around this, $29 million, of which I believe 14 is guaranteed through ONET here, and the rest is internal transfers from ONET, which aren't captured here, but obviously 29 million is around the 90% threshold. On the revenue side, total revenue for the group of 7 is 26.8 million. That is a combination of obviously many things, but 3 primary revenue generators for municipalities. First thing is taxation. Tax rates don't tell the whole story, obviously, until you get into the assessment valuations for properties in each, but I put it there anyways. The bigger thing is revenue generated from taxation, which, as you can see, the average is 11.6 million annually. Ours is just north of 10 million. Next, franchise fees. We collect substantially higher than average in 2022. And even though we have given notice to increase 2% in our electrical franchise fee, I expect the revenue to either stay stable or decline a little bit because various factors, including decrease in ACO generation fees and the sundial loss, which we're still trying to determine what that is. And the third thing is government transfers. So on the capital side, I think we do quite well because unconditional grant transfers such as MSI and gas tax are standardized throughout municipalities of the same size. And then we have a fairly robust grant writing program that we have been quite successful with. Where we lag behind is operating transfers. This is generally from either MSI operating or from transfers from other municipal governments, the counties, for example. Obviously, as you can see, it is kind of a dog's breakfast of what kind of ICF agreements, which are mandated by the province, different municipalities have with their partnered county. Olds is certainly at the lower end of that. To be fair, Edson and Hinton skew that average because Yellowhead County, of which both of those towns are in, is fairly wealthy, objectively, as and low population and generous in what they provide for recreation, fire, and the like. So again, total revenue, same slide as started with, $2 million. On average, we collect less than our comparator group. Expenses. Where do we spend more money than average? Same as last year, largely, recreation. The town of Whitecourt's highlighted, or reded rather, because it's a skewed number. They're generally closer to 6.5 to 7, but last year they had the bulk of their new arts and culture center come through. So if we were to average them out, we would be just over $1 million above average, I believe, was the arithmetic. And utilities, obviously, we continually blow this out of the water. This is a significant issue, drain, and our number one priority this year and going forward for the foreseeable future. Where would we spend averagely? Lo and behold, protective services. Despite what you might guess from seeing our impressive haul and fleet, we are actually just under average, and this was the same as roughly last year as well, that a lot of towns and counties jointly recognize the value of having a robust fire response service, and obviously bylaw is fairly common in terms of its efforts across towns our size, so we're right in that ballpark. Legislative side, which is largely council expenses, same thing. We're slightly under our average as well. The town of Hinton is shaded red because in their financial statements they don't break out the council from administration, so administrative expenses and council are mixed together, so I had to do a rough valuation, but it's not terribly inaccurate, I don't believe. And where do we spend less than average? Same thing in administrative. Hinton is shaded for the same reason, that I did have to do some estimation, but administration, which is largely contained within this building, Office of the CAO and Corporate Services, planning, which includes economic development as well, was a bit under. Transportation, again, is well under. And public health and welfare. And you'll see when we get to the next slide, this one really depends on where the auditors coded certain things. For example, libraries, some are put under public health and welfare, others are put under transfers to third-party organizations. So that one is hard to dissect, just because we're unsure of the granular detail of each financial statement. So those are the categories, or the departments, if you will, also contained in financial statements, generally in, I think, Schedule 5 or Schedule 13, depending on the format they follow for the standards. They do expenses by object, and there's several objects more than here, but these are the main ones. Salaries and benefits, which tends to be what any CAO hears from any public councillor, anything that you're overstaffed, you're bloated, you're this, you're that. In fact, as far as back as I can go, that is objectively untrue for the town of Olds. In fact, we spend about $3 million less on salaries and benefits than our average peer group. Contracted services is low. Materials, goods, supplies, what you buy is low. Interest on long-term debt is high, obviously. And transfers to other organizations. I did mention libraries as an example where this could go in one of two categories. And I'll actually interject here to ask Sheena to kind of comment on what this object generally is for the town of Olds, to give council a better idea, given that it's so so skewed.
So the items generally coded in here for olds specifically are the library board requisition, solid waste requisition, Parkland Regional Libraries requisition, all of our FCSS granting out to the community, our Destination Olds Collective Fund, which obviously is specific to olds, and then the Historical Society. That's what makes up that 1 million.
Thank you, Sheena. And of course, to get granular detail, even for our own, we would have to dig a bit deeper and present to council individually on these items, but it's something that certainly we want to make sure we're still measuring, benchmarking against other places and providing that information on how our dollars are spent, and then evaluating those spends accordingly, at least on a semi-regular basis. So then a brief summary of the last 8 to 10 years or so, just to give a bit more perspective. Our reserve balances have roughly not changed too much since 2013. We're just over $1 million less than we were 10 years ago, with some ebbs and flows. You see in 2014 was a big year, presumably for the ONET second debenture. Then 2020 we had a plethora of capital projects kick off or end. Operations Center, Rotary Park, the roundabout, for instance. And now we're sitting at 13.9. Capital funding unconditional, so that is largely three things, both MSI streams and the gas tax, for the sake of the argument, which is this last column. You see, in 2014, $2.7 million the town received. This year, we're on track to receive $1.7 million. So $1 million less that we collect in that funding, which is essential for our capital programs. And long-term debt, again, not too much of a surprise, but it has crept up at a peak to 2020 when we did extend our limit, and at the end of last year was down to 32 million. This amount does exclude interest costs, of course, so that isn't calculated in your debt limit. And our servicing costs are still well above average, well below the threshold reached by our debt limit. And then everyone's favorite topic, water loss and I&I. In 2014-2015, the SRD Commission was only partially operational. They were still diverting both to the town facilities and to what we call the Waskesiu line. So we couldn't get full data going back that far, just because it wasn't accurate. But Sheena put together everything we had from 2014 on the water side, and you can see, in fact, that it always has been a substantial problem, with a bit of correction going into this year so far at 31% loss. Small solace, October's came back around 23% loss, which is still nothing to write home about, but we're hoping we have seen some action taken that had some correction. Wastewater, same thing. When we turned on the commission fully in 2016, a 44% loss was recorded, and this year we're on track for 43%. And as our smart cover data shows, that inflow seems to be most of our problem, as opposed to infiltration, where it enters directly during a rain event, as opposed to the saturation, as infiltration, water infiltrates the ground into the pipes. So I'm assuming 2021, for example, was probably a dry year. I wasn't in this part of Alberta at that time, but if you think back, perhaps that was a reason why it dropped to 33%. But hey, that's what the Farmer's Almanac is for. So conclusions based on the above, and obviously you can draw your own conclusions. Here are my own, that our utility expenses being $3 million above our benchmark are weakening our financial position. We do not spend enough on existing infrastructure. Certain functions in the town are understaffed compared to the needs and objectives set by council. We collect nearly $2 million less in revenue than our comparator group average. capital reserves are insufficient for our mid to long-term capital needs, and our long-term debt limit is limiting our ability to mitigate risk. Now, I don't depress people on purpose, so it's important to note that this budget is focused on the challenges we face as opposed to the opportunities we have, which are certainly many, that the town, even though we have perhaps a weaker financial position than average, we have, in my opinion, a lot of core assets that rival, if not exceed, those of other communities in our peer group as well. And those assets, along with other more difficult to measure things, whether that be Olds College or our committed community groups, which there are many, and in tandem our volunteer groups, our hub for minor sports, you pick it. There's a lot here that we can connect back to, at least, of why we're faced with these challenges, but certainly I believe there's a lot of optimism in how we can overcome as well, but it's going to take a lot of strategy. So I'll stop there before the second and last part of this introduction. Is there any questions or clarifications on that?
Thank you very
rapid fire,
much. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, very informative. I'll go around the table at this time then and ask council if you're prepared to ask questions at this point. We'll start with Deputy Mayor Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in your presentation, CEO, you talked about revenue sources being our total revenue taxes, non-residential taxes, and franchise fees, government transfers. Internal revenue, though, wasn't covered at all in there. And I know we don't have a lot of internal revenue because of our situation with our facilities and stuff like that. Was there any comparable data with the other communities on that internal revenue generation from our own assets?
No, we don't really have, financial statements don't get into that level of granularity with revenue. They collect things such as user fees, for example, which user fees, the 95% are utilities, and those are kind of a flow through generally. But when you come to like sports field revenues or facility revenues, no, it's not broken out in that. We can collect that fairly easily, I believe. And I guess a second note related, but a little bit on the tangent, the next service level review, which we're hoping to get done on, I think, the 7th of December, 11th of December, has the third-party facilities coming forward, which was missed last time, which kind of talks about that a little bit as well.
Thank you.
Our Councillor Ryan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Dolan, through you to CEO Williams. Just wanted to ask with regards to the government transfers, and that is on the operating one. And I see, like, with the Olds being down at the 1.3 million compared to, say, Hinton, Whitecourt, and Edson. What are they doing different? Do you have any idea of what they're doing different to generate some of this government transfers through operating that we can source? And obviously, it's a quite a bit of difference between us and, say, Whitecourt, that is 4 million and we're at 1.3 million. So.
Yeah, a fair question, and it is tough because this does reflect the first iteration of the ICF agreements in 2017, 2018, when they were first introduced. So everyone kind of made a different deal. If I had a comment at a high level, because we're obviously due to renegotiate starting next year, one thing we missed is that in-between piece of capital and operating. I call it capital renewal, which is really more of an operating expense in a lot of ways. If you take, for example, the pool project, which the county did generously help fund at their 23%, those type of projects never were envisioned in our original ICF agreement. So that can add up fairly quickly, whether it's $175,000 for a large-scale $2.8 million project, or if it's $30,000 if you need to repair the surface of one of the arena pads. And so that capital renewal piece was never envisioned, and the town has paid 100% of that. Whereas other communities, I know Whitecourt, for example, for certain, has that piece specifically written into their agreement. So, But on the operating side, though, like what it takes to run an asset, whether it be fire department or a rink or a pool, the county of Mount View County is, I think, easily on average with what they should be contributing.
Supplemental, Mayor Dahl.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. And so are all of these government transfers up for operating or all with regards to the ICC? They're not from, from getting money from the province or from the federal government at all?
Not substantially, no. MSI operating, that is included in here, and that's the largest source, but I don't believe there's anything of note in operating.
We'll go to Director Linderman.
Also included in there is our police operating grants, so that's just under 400,000, but they would all be included in all of those as well.
Sorry, I should say, the only thing that would make the variance occur is that local government transfer, because the police grant and MSI operating are all in the same, we're all in the same formula, so it wouldn't fluctuate that much because of those two items. So.
Thank you, and we'll go to Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to the CAO. Just a question, I don't expect you to be an expert in all the other 7 comparator municipalities, but is Olds disadvantaged in terms of, I guess, what I'll say, the lack of diversity in our tax base, i.e. lack of commercial, lack of industrial? And at the end of the day, am I hearing that we have more of a revenue problem than an expense problem, setting aside things like I&I and perhaps our debt servicing and a few other buckets?
Good question, and I think it's going to be somewhat subjective, the answer. I would say lack of revenue is a problem for us. The expense part is, in my opinion, probably not expense in the true term. It's really an infrastructure problem that we haven't spent the money in the right places. So therefore, infrastructure is costing us money more than it should. And it's really unique as well because we're on a wastewater regional commission which only exists for a handful of municipalities out of the 350 municipalities or so in Alberta. So we're at a structural disadvantage that was not of our making as well. So it really throws the comparisons out the window because if you have I&I, everyone has I&I, but if yours is getting treated at the city of Red Deer for $2.50 a cubic meter, you should really focus your expenses on reducing your I&I. So what was the first part of your question? I forgot.
Just, the lack of perhaps diversity in our tax base. Are we more heavily skewed residentially compared to the Black Falls, the Edsons, the Hinton?
No, I think we're certainly on average with the northern ones, just because they have a large oil and gas and forestry sector, Edson, Hinton, Whitecourt, which does skew their average. But for, let's say, central Alberta, everything, Edmonton South, I would say we're above average. We have a remarkably diverse commercial and industrial sector here, and it's very advantageous to us to maintain and grow that. So.
Thank you. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to CO Williams. Under the benchmarking too, we're certainly above average on our assessment. Maybe perhaps for the general viewers that may be listening into this, you could give us a brief synopsis of why our assessments and who sets our assessments, is why the number is as it is.
Sure. Assessment's regulated by the province, so every class of property, which there are 4 primary classes: residential, non-residential, machinery and equipment, and farmland. 3 of those are market value, more or less, what a willing buyer and a willing seller come to. Farmland is out to lunch, but we won't get into that because it doesn't matter to us. The reason why assessment, which is assessed by our appointed assessor who's regulated by the province, why ours is higher is because property in Olds is more valuable than comparable properties in other communities, nearby and far. Residential being the primary component, that makes up over 70% of our assessment base. So on top of having, just larger commercial, industrial quantity, pushing our assessment value up overall, the individual land is worth more as well. So even though our tax rate is lower to match that, because in theory, if your assessment goes up, your tax rate can come down if you don't want to collect more revenue. The corollary of that, if someone decides to sell their house in Olds, they're going to, in theory, get more dollars than they would in one of these 7 communities, for example, for their house. And should their tax rate reflect that, end of, useful life value, that's always the pressure council faces, so.
Thank you for that.
All right, I believe I'm not seeing any further questions. Would you like to move forward?
Okay, and Sheena's going to jump in here at one moment, but we're going to move into capital budget 2024. And I just wanted, I think, touch on the first slide here. And so the themes that we prepared this presentation and the draft budget to council is kind of broken into 3 main ones. And water loss and I&I is top of mind. We have to get this under control. And the 2 main ones we're focusing on, with the $1.5 million that you'll see in a moment here, is the vapor testing report, actioning the recommendations there, which some are small and easy, others are large, expensive, and cumbersome. And the second thing is the Turner Report's recommendations. As you know, the Turner Report was done in 2017, mainly on water loss, but to touch on I&I a bit. And we're trying to figure out, there's no shortage of recommendations, and we're trying to figure out what is the best bang for our buck up front. There is a caveat here that the $3.4 million capital budget presented here, if we do find significant issues that we feel have to be fixed, council may see a budget adjustment come forward for a substantial amount, because everything under the ground gets expensive very fast. Second theme, improving our delivery of core services. I do believe that without increased financial investment of a large degree, we can do things more efficiently, and there's reasons for that, whether it be staff turnover or just not following best practices. I do believe we have a lot of staff in place who understand how we can improve things, and we really want to let them shine. And snow clearing, asphalt sidewalk maintenance, parks and sports fields are some key areas where I think through just adjustments we can improve those maintenance activities. And then economic growth. And we're not going to obviously cut our budget enough to get out of this issue. This is not a cost savings issue. We have to grow our economic base. And same with taxation. We just can't tax people until we feel we have enough money to fix our problems. It's not going to work, especially in an economy like we're facing right now. And housing, industry, and retention are something that administration believes we should all be focusing on as those key activities. Of course, these are all administrative opinions. Council can certainly have its own themes and disagree totally with what I'm saying. And I'll turn it over to Sheena now, if you can.
Thank you, CEO Wilms. So the first few slides here are just a quick 2023 review of our capital projects. I'm not going to go through all of these. On this first slide are all of our completed projects for this year. The next slide shows what we project will be our projects that will need to be carried forward. So that will include a bit of our 52nd Street rehabilitation. As we know, the weather's kind of gotten in the way there. Our Olds Aquatic Center, everything is complete except for the roof will need to be carried forward into 2024. Our rotary scoreboards, our meter pilot project, which will be an ongoing project into 2024. And then our snow management system, as far as I'm aware, the parts have been ordered but have not yet been installed. So we're going to probably be carrying that one forward as well. Moving on, do you have the clicker? One more. So moving on to what you will see coming forward today, our MIP program is focused on water loss and inflow and infiltration, so there are no deep servicing replacements planned in 2024 or large asphalt overlays. And as already has been mentioned, we do have two large items that have already been approved by council for 2024, which is our back truck and ice resurfacer. So today, we started our capital process months ago with 28 new projects being proposed by administration. 11 were removed prior to coming today. So today we will be going over 17 of these projects, which, as we've said before, totals 3.4 million. Those removed were a total of 1.165 million. Today's budget being presented is funded mainly through, obviously, our government grants. We have 355,000 coming from operating, which is a utilities transfer. 861,000 is coming from reserves, which includes 180,000 coming from off-site levies. The other 215,000 is just from trade-ins of, it'll be our back truck and our ice resurfacer. And with that, I think we'll move right into each project being presented today.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I just had a quick question on the 2024 capital, which was the large asphalt overlays. I thought we had, because that project for Memorial Drive was so far over budget, came in so far over costs, were we not going to put that towards the 2024, or is that going further down the road even?
Oh, that was the original plan, but in a budget, well, it wasn't quite a budget amendment, we decided to finish off 52nd Street with those funds to complete the underground to 50th Avenue. So those funds have been expended already.
I knew that we had put the money towards 52nd, but I thought we were still going to look at Memorial, so
Yeah.
obviously we're not.
It's probably not in the financial cards this year, no, unfortunately.
Director Lindeman.
I was just going to mention, with the focus being on inflow and infiltration, that was considered priority for 2024 as opposed to Memorial.
Okay. So yeah, no final decisions expected today. We would like general guidance, like a yes, no, or tabled. And table could mean, bring back, obviously, for further discussion if you need more information. Even though administration has presented a kind of a complete package, so to speak, that council has to be comfortable both on the project's merit and in, for at least $600,000 of it, depleting our reserves further because of it. And I believe we did have the total reserve, because we do have transfers into reserve as well, but I can't remember exactly what that ratio is, but we are expecting a net reserve drawdown based on this plan. And yeah, if we missed anything, whether that be Memorial Drive or other things, of course, this is council's budget, and council has to be of sound mind when it finally votes on it in early December. Sheena, you have your hand on the button.
I was just going to elaborate on the net drawdown to capital reserves. So even though I'm saying 861,000 is coming from reserves, the net drawdown will only be 417,000 should all of these be approved. And that is due to the fact that we transfer from operating to reserves a budgeted amortization annually.
Thank you for that. And I guess on the opposite end too, if council believes that a project is not funded, of course, and thinks reserves are a worthy use of it, that is totally within council's discretion as well. Okay, Councillor.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, and through you to the finance director. And just to reaffirm, as we have historically and in the past, we redirect or transfer a portion of water fees or wastewater fees to help offset some CapEx expense, and I'm sure that's reflected in your numbers, correct?
So in today's budget, we have 355,000 that is coming from utilities, from operating. That is lower than previous years, just given our current situation.
Just a quick overview. Those are the projects that we did remove prior to coming to council. These were submitted by the departments, and we did, upon me making the decision to remove it, I did request feedback to tell me why that was a bad idea, and everyone did submit those in prompt order. Obviously, I was for a reason that I believe that we could either defer it or it wasn't of value compared to other needs right now. Obviously, if council has any questions on these, happy to speak further on them.
We'll start with Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I just would like to speak to the snow dump site preparation. We talked about the need for snow dump and the critical need to expand that area because of the problems that we had with regards to that. So I'm just wondering about this one in particular.
Right, good question. That is a good asterisk, actually. The plan that was developed late summer had a fence going up and a stripping happening. We feel that it's not needed to be fenced at this time, as there is still a gate at the Ore Hedges ball diamonds that can be locked. We do believe the gravel needed can come out of our current operating budget. So we can do it, I guess, on the cheap, and then obviously if things go wrong, if we can't strip whatever soil's left after we have a winter of demolishing the grass internally, then we can look at contracting it out.
Super, thank you very much.
Thank you. We have Councillor Blatz and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I know on our trails, R&M repairs and maintenance, that's been removed. This will be maybe this year only because I believe that we really need to make sure we don't fall behind with the repairs and maintenance of our trails either, because we don't need to have any safety issues or concerns for the residents who do use those trails.
Yeah, a fair question. I think Sheena can jump in here too, because I don't speak in precision, as you know. We do still have a plan for trail maintenance. I do know we have some safety issues on the Winter Drive Tree Reserve Trail and near Winter Drive at the Tree Reserve Trail, and also on the Shannon Drive Trail as well. We do plan on trying to address those, and there's some money in operating set aside. This was proposed by Parks and Recreation as really what is needed to be proactive and also to maybe make some of those future connections. We talked about Duncan to Highlands Pond. That was part of this as well, as was working with Cornerstone to grade and gravel the Imperial to Toboggan Hill Trail, that little kind of goat trail that's being used right now. We took those out, but we still have, I think, some money, Sheena, to do some core repairs.
Right, yeah, so anything in the capital budget would be like a complete overlay of a trail or a new trail. I really should change the name of this capital project. But anything safety related on current trails would just be a repair and maintenance within operating.
Councillor Wilson?
No, I can give the group back a couple minutes. That was exactly my question. I just wanted confirmation whether that 150 was new build, and again, because in my terminology, but defer to the expert and the director. R&M typically for me is operating expense, so my question's been answered. Thank you.
I have a question, and then on Deputy Mayor Cummings. I would like to ask, probably through the CAO to Director Andrew, the fire training facility upgrades for $30,000. In the past discussions we had, there was dialogue that they could be revenue generators, like revenue facilities. Is that true?
Yes, so there are opportunities for revenue generation with the facility, but with these proposed upgrades, I don't see that changing. It might attract some new clientele that we wouldn't have had previously, but I don't see deferring this as a detractor to that.
Thank you, that's what I was looking for. And are there any further questions? Deputy Mayor Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Throughout the year, we've had conversations about a lot of these things, but one jumps out at me is I've never heard anything about this project in our conversations prior, and that's a Rotary concession kitchen. Yep, I agree in removing capital projects if they're not necessary, but this one I've never even heard of before, so I don't understand it. Can I get a little background on that one?
Yes, fair question. It was fairly new to me as well. As I understand it, there was never an intent to build a kitchen facility at Rotary, but that concession area, if you're familiar with the part off the bathroom, exists. I think there's a fridge in there right now. It needs some core equipment upgrades to be able to, say, serve hot dogs out of, for example, with, a little hot dog machine and whatnot. And that was kind of in the cards, but unfortunately not properly planned out. So it was added with community services and then taken out by myself, and my intention perhaps is to throw it back to the user groups to see if there's any potential to fundraise there, if it is a needed asset that the town doesn't, in my opinion, need to be spending on this right now. So.
Thank you very much. We'll go to, I believe, Councillor Daly and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And through you to CAO or maybe Director Lindeman. I appreciate the list here, and I appreciate your direction that administration has gone in dividing out the needs from the wants. Now, my question is, if we look back at the 2023 capital list we have already approved, there's some items on there that we have not purchased, I understand, which is the vac truck and the ice resurfacing machine. Are those items there that we can looking at a different plan moving forward, maybe not replacing, but rebuilding and refurbishing, rather than spending the whole lot and maybe saving some money there? Just a thought that, it may be a little bit of a savings there as if we could recondition them rather than getting rid of them and buying a new one.
So those two items have already been approved in the 2024 budget, and they were brought early, like they were brought to council a couple months ago, because we had to order them months in advance. So both of them have been ordered already and will be delivered in 2024.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I mean, I didn't realize we're committed as far as ordering already, so thank you for the information.
And if I can just to add on to that point too, and not to bring everything back to inflow and infiltration, but that's my style. Something like a vac truck, I do believe that being in central Alberta, there is a robust private sector market for vac trucks. There is always that timing thing, because when you need a vac truck, generally everyone else needs a vac truck too. But if we didn't have such severe sewer line issues, I do believe we would not be looking at such a substantial purchase, that we could leverage the private sector a bit better. But given how frequently you have to flush and fix and do emergent repairs, that's just not in the cards right now for us, unfortunately. So.
Thank you for that, C.O. Williams. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, through you to the CEO or to the director. Just a quick comment. Deferring the RCMP roof replacement, will that, I know this is the capital budget, but will that drive some remediation, repair, maintenance expense, operating expense? And again, I assume our risk assessment on the roof says that we can defer for 12 to 15 months without catastrophic failure?
Another good question. Catastrophic failure is not expected, no. But there is roughly, I think, a $10,000 to $15,000 expected bill annually until it is repaired. I think last year was the first year we incurred it, Director Andrew, but we're expecting it for 2024 as well. And the issue on this as well, besides the cost of it, we do. It's another part of that capital renewal piece that we think should be captured in perhaps a ICCC agreement. And so we want to defer that to have a more robust discussion with our partners before we do projects like this. So,
I believe we've got questions completed. We can move forward.
Perfect. So we'll jump right into our 2024 draft capital budget being presented today. First item on here is the security cameras. This item was started in 2023. We went out to RFP, have awarded the contract in getting all of our facilities online with the same company. So we've started with the Aquatic Center and the Sportsplex. The company that we went with, they can use our existing cameras. There are no monthly fees, so it's only ever going to be capital purchases. So being presented today, though, is purchases of new cameras for facilities that currently do not have a security system. So that includes the Operations Center, Rotary Athletic Park, this building, and Centennial Park. And again, no monthly fees, it's all just capital camera purchases. I would open that to any questions from council.
Well, that was some good research and good information sharing back. Do we have any further questions for security cameras? Seeing none, we'll move down to the next item, bathroom
So the-
renovations.
Yeah, next item is bathroom renovations at our RCMP building, and I will pass this off to Director Andrew to speak to.
Thank you. So the proposal is renovation modification to the existing facility. When the detachment was constructed approximately 20 years ago, it was a very different scope of work, and so the ultimate issue that's come up is the fact that female washroom facilities are very limited in that current detachment, so there's only one stall in the female washroom. And back when it was constructed, I'm not sure if there was any female members or staff members working there, but currently there's upwards of 6, and so you can appreciate that when there's lineups for washroom facilities, that is not effective and inclusive in a work environment. So that's where the demand has come. And unfortunately, with the cost here, there is some substantial rework that has to be done with moving a wall to facilitate the extra space. So that's why it looks like a fairly expensive addition to put in an extra stall or space, but that's what we're faced with.
Well, that's a significant increase. In my opinion, I can see the need. Does council have further questions? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, through you to Director Andrew. Would this then double the stall, so we're just looking at adding one extra stall for this bathroom?
No, I believe there was in the plans intent to add 2 additional stalls, if I remember correctly. And then the big part of it is moving a wall simply because of the way the plumbing is run there. Then it does create increased space in the female change room area as well. So there's a couple of areas of improvement there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that answer. All right, we'll move forward. Do you have anything? Okay, go ahead and we'll move forward then for the fixed solar radar signs.
Yep, so the next item is under municipal enforcement, and that is fixed solar radar speed signs. And again, I'll pass that to Director Andrew.
Thank you again. The proposal here is based on some feedback that we had from citizens through this year and through identified areas of concern with traffic speeds and reminding motorists of what the posted speed limits are. When we've done investigation on options, this is one solution that many municipalities are going to, is the use of fixed solar powered radar speed signs that can be attached to whether it's light poles or specific posts placed in strategic locations. So the cost of the design that we've found of current use or model that would be advantageous to us that records these speeds and time of day so that we can extract that data, similar to our mobile signs, are approximately $6,000 each. So there are options with these that at the cost of that, they could be permanently mounted in a desired location, or they could be set up that we could affix posts in different locations in problem areas in town, and then the signs could be moved based on the need. So there is some flexibility with this type of a structure or operating system. And the big piece is why we would go this way versus the use of our trailers, is that the trailers are cumbersome and they do take up roadway space, and they are highly, highly prone to vandalism. So we struggle with the fact that they like to be tampered with based on the fact they're right on the roadway. So these should eliminate that. I can't say completely, but certainly decreases the opportunity. So That's what we're proposing, was 2 of them, and it could be adjusted based on council's discretion.
Thank you. Would that also affect vandalism with the movable ones that we can relocate to different areas?
So, yeah, obviously, if we can utilize one, it increases our capacity to be obtaining data in multiple locations at the same time, would be great. But yes, then we can move them to different areas that are a little less off the beaten trail, if you will, of foot traffic and opportunity.
Thank you. We'll start with Deputy Mayor Cummings and then Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to administration there. So $6,000 a unit, $12,000 total budget ask. This doesn't seem to include installation, or which I would assume is part of the capital cost. You're talking of fixing it to a pole or new mounts and new structures and stuff like that. I'm loath to continually hear, well, we'll take that out of the operational budget. Can we adjust this capital budget request to actually include the complete cost of the project, not just the cost of the units that you're purchasing?
So in the proposed cost, there is a small amount of money included in this budget ask for the hardware used to mount them. Now, you are correct in the fact that we did not account for the installation of new posts. This was based on the proposal that we would be affixing them to current light standards in the area, so there would be no extra additional capital cost to it. But if it was council's direction on the location to be multi or variable, even whether it's this year or in future years, then yes, we would need extra capital funds to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, through you to Director Andrew. And perhaps, depending upon the success we have with this should be a reoccurring capital ask, maybe for year after year, because we're all very well aware of the amount of residents in town here who have been concerned with traffic speed, traffic flow and such. So I would just like to make the recommendation that perhaps this be reoccurring.
It's certainly council's discretion to do so, and we'd be happy to bring that back. I believe wholeheartedly that as we collect data from whether this is an approved item, getting that data back to administration and council to see where our problem areas are, I think there is advantage to it. And again, in the municipalities that we looked at that have widespread use of these devices, they definitely are a long-term solution to problem areas. So it gives them the constant reminder that the speed is being exceeded. And so again, it's not to be confused with photo radar. There's no tickets that are issued from this, but it does give that visual warning, and it also gives us that data to look at. So we would definitely expect that there's 3 or 4 locations within town that would be under consideration for them. And so, yeah, we would definitely like to see that if we see the positive results from it.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I like to call it our pilot project with everything that we've talked about in the past, and agree also that we would likely need more. So we'll go with Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, through you to Director Andrew. Yeah, that was my thought as well. I'm wondering, is 2 enough as a trial or a pilot project? I'm okay with starting with this. My question, though, is of late we've been getting really good data and summary data from the little trailers as far as traffic flow and so on. Will we get that same amount of data from these portable signs, enhanced data? Brief comment, please.
Yep, excellent question. The intent is that with these models, they do record the same data that we capture with our mobile signs, which is traffic flows, speeds, the high and low averages, time of day, and all of that. So that's exactly what we're utilizing right now, and that gives us the kind of the baseline of what we look at as the problem areas and times for sure.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dole, through you to Director Andrew, or perhaps our CAO Williams. With regards to these signs, we just heard the other day that the trailer can't operate in the wintertime, and I'm just wondering about these signs. Are they functional throughout the whole year? And also the maintenance to make sure that the solar panels are cleared off of snow when it happens. So that would be an increase in our service level.
Yeah, I can speak with that. Again, with the selection of these particular models, based on the literature that we obtained on researching the right model, is that they do operate in the winter months. So I believe the rated operating temperature zone is minus 35 degrees in them. So I really hope that we don't see that on a regular basis. But the fundamental difference with these versus the trailer-mounted ones is our trailer-mounted signs, because of the size of them, they require 2 large automotive-type batteries to operate, and the solar panel only works to kind of replenish the top end of the battery, and so prolonged periods of cold and snow, and then the size of the solar panel has an impact. These units are quite compact, and again, based on the use of other municipalities, they appear that I think the technology has gotten a lot better with the solar panel and the use of LED as opposed to the incandescent lights. So our trailers are quite dated now, and so that's the issue that we see with them. So hopefully, yes, all intents and purposes, they're multi-seasonal.
Thank you. Very good discussion, and thank you for your interaction, Director Andrew. I believe we're ready to move, we're ready then to move forward to operations, snow removal, et cetera.
Yes, so the next item we have is our snow removal attachments, and I will have Director Pedro speak to this.
Thank you, Council. So this stems from our service level discussions on snow removal. In an effort to become more efficient with those practices, we are looking at purchasing essentially 2 larger box blade units. One would be for our skid steer and one would be for our loader. Now we feel this is pretty integral for not having to redo work when we're clearing snow. Essentially the box blades will allow us to clear that particular lane and won't leave essentially a windrow that we need to go back and clear. So they will, in theory, cut down on quite a bit of time going forward, hence the ask for the 2 attachments here.
Okay, we're talking with questions for Director Pedro in regards to snow removal attachments. Any questions or further questions? One from Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan, through you to Director Pedro. So with these attachments, it says here in the detailed description, it talks about quite a bit about the removal of snow at our facilities. So that would be our parking lots, I imagine. And so could this equipment also be used on streets or trails as well to facilitate snow removal in some of the areas, maybe in the downtown area?
Absolutely. Yeah, we would look at using it in the roads for sure. The trail system, perhaps with a smaller unit on the skid steer, but we would have to look at certain areas.
Thank you for that question. No further? Okay, then we'll move down to motor grader.
Again, continuing with operations, I'll look to Director Pedro to speak to the motor
Apologies.
grader.
No worries. So this is, I would assume has been a discussion previously, but the lease on our current grader expires in May of next year. So at this point, we have a few options. One being purchasing our grader outright, releasing it, or essentially purchasing a new grader or a new lease on a new unit. So we felt at this time that it would make most sense to just purchase this current unit outright. And that's kind of up for discussion at this point. The biggest factor here is that the price of equipment has gone up quite a bit. And so if we did want to look at purchasing a new unit or leasing a new unit, those costs have gone up quite exponentially. So I believe Director Linderman can correct me, but I think we went up from around $3,000 a month in lease costs to potentially around $10,000, so depending on the unit.
Yeah, so just to add to all that, a new grader currently costs 550 to 600,000. The lease costs, as we looked into, we currently pay just under 4,000, and they are up between 8 and 10, depending on which unit you go with.
Councillor Blatz has a question.
Thank you, and to either Director Linderman or Director Pedro. What is the age of this grader, and is there a concern with that it's going to start nickel and diming us in the future as far as maintenance?
It's a 2019, so it was a 5-year lease. It's up in June of 2024.
So well within the standards that we have set for vehicle replacement.
E.L. Williams?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And just to add to Councillor Blatz's question, as a former professional purchaser of graders in a county life, the graders right now are not a great machine to own anything past 5 years once the warranty expires. Unfortunately, our grader warranty generally is sold to governments at 5 years and or 7,500 hours. I believe our operating hours are under 3,000 after 5 years. So utilization is obviously a factor, but it comes down again to timing, availability of contract graders. But with the new graders, what's going to start happening is the green technology on them. Essentially the DEF, what you see on large-scale diesel trucks, that will start to break. And unfortunately, to fix it, it is a special, we don't have an in-house mechanic, let alone someone with a John Deere code reader to tell us what CF4 hashtag means when it won't start. It's always a risk, but obviously the financial situation we're trying to balance right now is that the risk might be worth it, but that risk is probably more so on the availability of contract graders should our grader go down. So.
Deputy Mayor Cummings and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So a quick question on the lease versus ownership. Just a quick math in the back of my head. If we went with a new lease, it would cover, the cost of that lease would be covered by this purchase price in 2 years-ish. When we look at lease payments, are they also capital budgeting or operating budget? Because I believe they're operating budget as a lease. Therefore, they're not eligible through the LGFF funding model. It would have to come out of general revenues, tax or assessments or whatever. Correct me if I'm wrong there, please.
So with a lease, you have to look at your intent of the lease when you're finished. So if you intend right from the beginning to buy it out, then it is a capital lease. If you intend to just keep releasing that same equipment or whatever, it's operating. So generally, all of our leases are operating because we don't intend to buy them out. And you are correct, if it goes to operating, then we cannot use LGFF for that funding.
Thank you.
So Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Just a question through you, either to the Director of CEO or to Director Pedro. You talked a little bit about the usage of this grader, the hours and so on. What has our reliability been with this machine while it's been under lease? Because I assume, well, again, when we buy it out, so we will be going to the street then for any repair and maintenance, given that we don't have heavy-duty mechanics in our employment.
Just off the top of my head, I don't remember any particularly large repairs and maintenance or anything like that on this machine.
Yes, Director Pedro.
Sorry. Thank you. Just to add to that as well, we did have that discussion down at the shop, and we did look at what we've done to it to date, and it's been quite minimal. There is a bit of a concern that the differential may be experiencing some issues, so we are preemptively having that looked at just to determine where that is and if it is going to cost us any money going forward.
All right, so we're moving on to transportation. We have 57th and 43rd roundabout engineering. I'll pass that to CAO to speak to.
Thanks, and this was my lead earlier this summer, and it involves the next two decision papers, this one and the following. This was the offsite levy reserve transfer that was noted in the introduction. So, two projects. The first is a future, what we call signalization, which can mean either traffic lights or a roundabout at the intersection of 54th Street and 57th Avenue, which I'm sure we all know well. Should the Miller Meadows development take off, like we assume it will start next year, that intersection will soon become untenable as a four-way stop, and we have to look at signalization. It's been identified for a lot of years in our offsite levy project list. It's in the updated bylaw the council just saw on Monday still, but we do believe that a roundabout is a more feasible option than traffic lights at that location for various reasons. And this calls for, in 2024, the design of that roundabout to be completed with a theoretical capital expense coming forward for construction in 2025. But that construction part depends on further development happening. We won't preemptively build it without shovels in the ground. And
Yeah, Councillor Blatz?
Okay, my only concern with this, and I know this is probably not a really capital project discussion, but if it's going to be at the corner of 57th and 54th, which is a very congested intersection, I cross through it daily, would it not be better to put light signalization there, just due to the fact that with the schools and the crosswalks, I'm concerned with the safety of people crossing the street, because we've already heard from residents who had concerns about the crosswalk and people not paying attention, and perhaps maybe the roundabout would be better served at the new intersection going into the Miller Meadows as opposed to 54th and 57th.
and that's something will be part of the design as well, the feasibility of a roundabout also. Right now, it makes sense just because of the speed issues that green lights provide, that even though crossing is somewhat more difficult potentially at roundabouts, I believe it is manageable. Speed is objectively easier to manage at a roundabout, based on your willingness to wreck your vehicle, I guess. But it's something I believe will be part of the design process.
Thank you for that answer. Deputy Mayor Cummings.
Madam Mayor, so this intersection's had so much conversation over the past couple of years. And I've asked a lot of questions about. I've asked the Director of Public Safety there. That's not the right terminology at all. Sorry, Director Andrews. There's never been an accident at this intersection with a pedestrian, although numerous anecdotal stories of near misses. We talked about signalization, and you had mentioned it just a moment ago, C.O. Williams, about the speed of a green light, which was brought up that if right now every single vehicle is required to stop at that intersection with a four-way stop, you put in lights, then 50% of the traffic is no longer required to stop at that intersection and continues on at the speed they're going. And it was recommended by our protective services as well as the RCMP to maintain a four-way stop for traffic control as opposed to signalization as a set of streetlights. Roundabout, this is the first time I've heard about the possibility of building a roundabout in there, but that is a highly dense residential street corner. Building a roundabout there, and you'd mentioned the challenge of having roundabouts with pedestrian crossings. We know that the youth population during school hours that cross that intersection going in either direction to the junior high or to the elementary schools extremely high. I'm looking forward to this assessment to see key information like that. Pedestrian crossing capability at a roundabout seems very challenging. I've never seen one that works well. But that to me is more, and again, the common sense knowledge that there has never been an accident here. It is a very safe intersection that we see here today. Anecdotally, there's concern, but technically and statistically, there's no concern at this intersection. We brought that up numerous times by our experts in the public safety sector with the RCMP, our peace officers. So taking that into consideration, I just don't want to build something because there's some political will to build it. I'd like to see some actual safety concerns addressed, and if there is an actual safety concern at this intersection. So I look forward to the funding of this study.
QCO first, and then we'll go to Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, and just to note, the safety is not the primary driver of signalization here. It is going to be congestion, and that's also part of the design. That based on X amount of units being essentially using this intersection as their primary egress and access into town and out of town, what is that going to do to the current capacity issues? So, administration's making an assumption that we do have probably an hour on each end of the day congestion right now. How badly will that get? And then what is the spillover effect to other areas nearby? Should congestion not be addressed there as development occurs to the south? So I think safety obviously is paramount in the design. The reason we're bringing this forward is that we believe that should development occur south of there, like it is planned at Miller Meadows and being advertised for Chinook Meadows, that intersection is not built for that purpose right now. So.
Thank you. Who was it? Councillor Ryan? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. I too echo the concerns with regards to the safety of crossing on a roundabout. I've witnessed lots of roundabouts around the world and realize that it can be problematic for people to cross. But also, I'm just wondering if we even have the space over there for it. I remember when we put the roundabout in on Highway 2A there, we were told about the requirements for space, so I'm not sure about what kind of size you would want for a roundabout in that particular area, and if there is space. So I'm not even sure if it's even worth proceeding to even look at this with regards to that, or whether or not there are other avenues to pursue that would do better to handle traffic, such as signalization, or to handle pedestrian traffic, such as adding in a proper crossing lights in that particular area. So I'm not even sure whether or not we should even be looking at a roundabout if we don't even have a space for it. So I'm not sure if that's all going to be in this sort of study for the 30,000 or not, but I think we really need to look at whether or not that's the route to go, or whether there should be other better alternatives to look at.
I'd like to add to that. I'm visualizing myself the same question, look forward to the study. The roundabout, for example, what about our agriculture? We're on a road there that today is bringing in agriculture for the Auction Mart and the Ag Society, because 2A was closed off with the posts in front of the car wash that eliminated that. I think there's a lot of factors that I can't wait to hear the study in that regard, because that is currently where they're coming in now today to get to those locations.
Yes, all fair points. It's important to note that none of us are engineers in the room, save for Director Pedro, and this is why these studies are done. You do want to be proactive on this, regardless of what the answer is, whether or not you like it or not. Let's just hire the people who know what they're talking about. It's coming from an offsite level reserve, which is specifically designated to pay for the impacts of development off-site, which this is. So whether it's a roundabout or signalization, it could be explained better in here, but it will be designed out. We do have the space, obviously, for a non-AT roundabout there. If you go to Gas Alley, if you head west of Costco, they have similar type of designs throughout that new subdivision. It's very doable. It comes down to, I think, safety, traffic flow, and preference, I think. So.
Did you want to add to that? Go ahead, Director Pedro.
Yes, thank you. So I think CEO Williams eloquently explained the process, but if I could just add a little bit from the engineering side. So part of that study would look at addressing a number of issues. So potentially what is future volumes to the south there. They're going to look at if that intersection currently passes or fails, is sort of the technical term. So we'll look at current traffic volumes, current turning movements, and there's criteria for engineering design that will stipulate whether it passes or fails. If it does fail, then it's going to look at what those options are, whether it be signalization with lights or a roundabout. If it is a roundabout, there's a number of issues that we'll look at. So one being the road classification. So it's going to take into account what the level of service is on that road, what type of traffic compositions on that road, size of vehicles, that type of thing. So it's certainly going to be a good exercise, but I think it is prudent to look at that in preparation for the future.
Thank you very much for that. I like your term level of service on that road because that's key. I think we've had great discussion on this topic. Ready to move on? I will be taking a 10-minute recess at 10:30, just so everybody is aware. Thank you.
So the next item we have is the 67A Design and Construction, and again, I'll pass that over to CAO.
Thank you again, Director Lindeman. So with some work that we're doing with the Loblaws Corporation, the road heading south out of the Cornerstone Shopping Development, Walmart Canadian Tire, is currently barricaded. Starting in 2024, we would like to construct that road. Plan and start construction is the plan. From Highway 27 south to what we call the Caswell ASP area, approximately 80 to 100 meters perhaps of roadway. The rationale for that is largely to facilitate the currently landlocked commercial development potential of the credit union lots and the lots to the far west. Again, this is an off-site levy expense that off-site levies were collected over the last several decades for improvements like this in this area. There are finite things we can spend it on, and only in that area may we spend that money, is also another caveat. So even though it is somewhat built without firm, say, interest, guaranteed interest in that commercial development, I think it's long overdue in that area of town, especially with the opportunity we're presented with through partnering with Loblaws to do something there and hopefully encourage further development in that western commercial district.
For that. And I would open the floor then if there's any added comments. No, we all are on the same page with your comments, CAO Williams. We'll move forward.
So moving on to water now, we have our fire hydrant replacement program, and again, I'll pass this along to Director Pedro.
So this ask is fairly straightforward. It's based on an assessment of our hydrants in town. We currently figure there's approximately 150 that do require replacement. Historically, this would have just come up as an annual expense out of the operating budget, but I think this method is more prudent to ensure efficiency and proper operations going forward. So the ask would be for $85,000 each year, and I would expect that this would be a recurring capital budget item going forward. It is quite important, given that if the hydrants aren't working, that is an issue for emergency services, and so we need to maintain that infrastructure going forward.
That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Any further questions for Director Pedro? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you very much, Mayor Dolan, through you to Director Pedro. Kind of wondering why, because it says here about the program would replace just 5 hydrants every year, and if you do the math, it's 150. That'd take 30 years to replace, and by the time you get to that, you're going to start it all over again, replacing some of the ones you just replaced, plus adding on other ones. So I'm just wondering if we're under budgeting this amount of replacement, and certainly does the 85,000 is you divide that by 5. That'd be 17,000 a hydrant. So is that right, or does that include whatever other costs that are involved in doing the replacement, like the labor?
Yeah, great question. So that's a full-scale replacement. So that includes the actual fire hydrant itself, the lead, the valves, any sort of excavation and restoration. So it could be asphalt, sidewalk, boulevard repairs as well. So that's the $17,000 amount. The hydrant amount alone is about $7,000 to $8,000.
And I can just speak quick to the life cycle. So a hydrant actually has a life cycle of about 75 years. That's what we have it in our TCA as. So at 85,000, we should be good for the 400 that we have.
Thank you for that update. That helps. Councillor Ryan?
Supplemental, it still seems a little low, like you'd still be looking at 5 years, at 30 years to replace the ones that need to be replacing, and how much are the other 300, going to take. So I'm just wondering whether or not we should be actually looking at trying to replace a few more, or increasing this budget, and how much will it help on the Iowa or our water loss or whatever else.
And very good point. And I guess the first main thing is that you got to start somewheres, and if you're starting at zero, I guess there's always a bit of voodoo arithmetic involved. One thing that's not captured is that we do hope to restart our deep servicing replacement at areas of town which are also very old infrastructures. So what's not captured are those ones that we will strategically not replace, because we do plan on building that infrastructure. For example, like the top 3 priorities going forward for deep servicing is probably 50th and 51st and 54th. So there will be, for example, a dozen or more hydrants in that area, but you're still correct. 85,000 is insufficient, but obviously we will take stock each year and bring it back to council. So.
Yes, Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to Director Pedro, and yeah, I appreciate the comments and the concerns around the speed and at which we're replacing these, but I guess I look at this as being a fluid plan, adjusted year to year, and hopefully adjusted if and when and once the provincial government comes forward with some additional funding. But a direct question for Director Pedro. I assume then that we've got some kind of a risk-ranked spreadsheet of our fire hydrants dealing with the worst 5, 6 most aged, most disrepaired hydrants that need to be replaced, or how do we do that?
That's exactly correct. So each year we are required to flush each hydrant, and that's part of our operating of the system and reporting to Alberta Environment. And so through that process, we do take note of their condition, flow rates, any sort of deficiencies on the hydrant there, and so it would be based on that priority list.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So replacing fire hydrants isn't something that we are just starting to do today. It's something I believe we've been doing for quite a long time. We did it when I worked for the Utilities Department 8 years ago. All contracted out services and stuff and such like that. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around the financial process that used to be in place last year in the 2023 budget for replacing fire hydrants, to switching to the capital process to do that, because it is still in current revenue rather than grants. So it's not like we're using LGFF funding for this. We're using the utility budget, which would be the same as prior. Is there some significant reason we're moving it from operational costs and as our repair and replacement to capital part of the budget?
So according to our tangible capital asset policy, any repair or maintenance on an engineered structure is capital, no matter what. So anytime a fire hydrant is replaced, it is a capital cost anyways. It's fit within our budgets, but it is right now formalizing an actual replacement program for this and having it itemized out.
Thank you. I would be prepared then to take a 10-minute recess for everyone for a bio break and or coffee warm-up, and we will reconvene in 10 minutes. Okay, thank you very much for your patience. We're back, and go ahead, Sheena, Director Linderman.
Thank you. So the next item we have is our SCADA system modernization, and again, I will turn that over to Director Pedro.
Thank you very much. So this request is to update our SCADA system, and for those perhaps watching, SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition System. So typically that is the industry standard for the software for industrial processes such as water treatment, sewage treatment, and so every once in a while, as with most softwares, they do need to be upgraded. Typical lifespan on the SCADA software itself is about 10 to 20 years, depending on which version that you use. This request would be to upgrade both the software side and then the hardware side as well, because there is a number of computer hardware pieces that need to be upgraded in order to support the new software. And so the ask is for both the software and hardware side there. The issue when SCADA systems become obsolete, they're no longer supported, you lose functionality in some of the tracking and the data logging there. And in order to keep that going, there has to be that investment. So we are approaching that life cycle cost, hence the need to improve and upgrade there.
Questions? None? Okay, Deputy Mayor Cummings and Councillor Walsh.
Thank you. So we have a program to create these new or to install new smart meters on our water distribution system at the residences and businesses in town, which have a great repertoire of data collection capabilities. And then we have a SCADA system for our main distribution centers at the reservoir. Is there a potential, or have we investigated a potential to link these two systems together into one SCADA system rather than two separate systems, monitoring them separately? To me, if there is an interoperability in the two systems, having one system monitor both seems to be more advantageous, in my opinion. So I'm just wondering if we've even investigated the interconnectivity of those two systems.
So I'm not familiar with SCADA being able to incorporate that. I know there is external software that you can use to actually tie those pieces of information together. And that's something we would look at as part of next year's I&I budget there, investing in that.
You will go to Councillor Walsh, Councillor Blatz.
I guess my question's along the same vein as Councillor Cummings. It's like the wastewater system and the water system both use SCADA systems, and I'm just wondering if we ever had that discussion to see if there's economies of scale of financing these things between all the systems. That would be my question.
We want to work with that question first, and then I'll go to Councillor Blatz.
Essentially, yes. When performing these upgrades, we would look to the programmer and see if there's that option to integrate.
Anything further, Councillor Walsh? Okay, Councillor Blatz.
Thank you. Mayor Dahl, basically that was going to be my question, seeing that the existing technologies currently exist in the system, which as Councillor Walsh has said, both the Wastewater Commission and the Water Commission use SCADA. So these then would become compatible with their systems? That's basically what you said, was it not? Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah, I
very
just
much.
wanted to put it in more simple language so I understood.
That's good. Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to Director Pedro. Just a question. I assume this transition from our old and getting older and obsolete SCADA to a new would be fairly seamless from a user perspective as far as training and the new technology and monitoring. I'm just thinking from a complexity perspective.
Relatively straightforward. There'd be a bit of a learning curve because there is new features with the new SCADA software, but nothing that's insurmountable for our operators.
Sorry, and the supplier, thank you. And then the supplier of the new SCADA would handle that training, that transition.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, the consultant that we have working on the current design would handle that process.
Very good. Move forward, please.
All right, so our next project is our water loss and I&I, and again, Director Pedro.
Right, so we have, of course, obviously need to address this issue. And so we have proposed in this strategy addressing a number of items, some being the replacement of service connections on Duncan Place, continuing monitoring smart covers, assessment of the water meter project, which is currently being installed, the leak detection system investigation there, because there is avenues for more advanced leak detection that we are looking into, just to assist with that, continuing sewer relining, and then replacement of old underground service utilities, more smart covers, and further manhole lining and refurbishment. And then, of course, continuing on with the vapor testing, investigation, and remediation there. I would note that at this point, we don't have specific allocations for each of these items. These are kind of just what's being proposed at this point. And part of this discussion is going to be figuring out what that estimated schedule and the costs for each of these items would be. So there is going to be flexibility as we move forward here and determine what the priority is and what areas we need to do first. And going forward, we will be figuring that out relatively soon.
Thank you very much. We've had lots of information throughout the year in this discussion. Are there any further comments council wishes to make? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you very much, Mayor Dolan, through you to either Director Pedro or CEO Williams. Do we have any idea, doing all of this, how much will actually decrease our water loss in I&I? Like, how much of a impact will spending the $1.5 million have on reducing the $2 million loss going forward? Do we have any idea of that?
No, nothing firm. I should probably add to that as well. There is a dollar loss that's easy to quantify, and everyone sees it. What's not quantified is the liability we're putting on our current infrastructure by not repairing leaking water and sanitary pipes that are broken. That if we think that a $2 million loss in revenue is significant, wait till we have a catastrophic failure of infrastructure. So that's something that's really difficult to quantify that we always have to keep in the back of our mind.
Thank you for that answer. Very good. Deputy Mayor Cummings?
Thank you. So this question's a little pointed here when it comes to because you've mentioned a couple of times, CEO Williams, that we may not have enough staff in this department to fully utilize the capabilities to repair it. I'm looking more at the project management side of this rather large project, and very cumbersome and very detailed and very different in every single aspect. Do you believe that we have the project management capabilities in-house right now to manage this project of I&I replacement over the next 3 or 4 years as we try to get this $2 million cost under budget? Or is it worthwhile to investigate externally sourcing project management on this rather abnormal, not run-of-the-mill project?
Good question. I do believe we have built our bench strength in project management the last 12 months or so to a solid level, but something like this requires what you would see in a deep servicing replacement. If I can use the Duncan Place servicing connection replacement as an example, that involves digging down, unfortunately, 10 to 12 feet. We estimate those services are buried much deeper than usual. Ripping up asphalt sidewalks, front lawns, replacing the infrastructure, that will be managed by a contracted engineer essentially, who then our staff would oversee them. So it's a tiered process, much like we see on the let's say 52nd Street. The issue where we always find the issue when we contract out work, last year, we had one bidder for our capital replacement program, our deep servicing. This year, we had two with a very large price differential. It's more the quality of contractors we're able to get that we find most of our issues come down to, that we are very tied to, unfortunately, that lowest bid price. And in fact, sometimes it's the only bid price. So there's always that risk built in there, but the internal capacity is there, provided we spend the money on the professional engineering services to oversee the contractor. And that engineering service are the ones that design the work from stage one. So in theory, they understand what should be happening and how and when it should happen. But hopefully that addresses your question to some extent.
If it's supplemental, go ahead, Deputy Cummings, and then Councillor Blatz.
Definitely supplemental. So maybe I'm not explaining it very well. So what I'm thinking of is not individual project management of each subcomponent of the I&I issue that we're having. If you look over the last decade or so, when we've been looking at I&I and especially water loss, it's piecemeal, in my opinion, in that we were doing this project and we're doing that project and we've got this report and that report and this report, because we've had lots of reports over the years. No, I'm talking about the overall, if we call all of this water loss and I&I as one project. And I'm asking if we have the capabilities internally to manage that program as one program with this. I agree with you that if we're going to do a road underground replacement, you absolutely have a contractor do all that sort of stuff. They have their own project management of that particular project that should report to another project manager who's managing the entire I&I and water loss project. That's what I'm asking, not necessarily each individual project, but someone to and again, it's no knock on Director Pedro, it's just such a huge issue facing our town that is not normally within the scope of a director, in my opinion. And I'm just wondering if it would be more advantageous to have someone to lead this particular rather large project as a single project.
Fair question. Sorry, I did misunderstand. I would say yes. I would agree with you that further capacity would be needed to take on this effectively. And that would come in the form, I would assume, of filling that vacant CED position, for example. That would be a large component of that future person's job, hypothetically. That right now, if we wanted to, say, make water loss I&I a single package of a project and have those linear steps and priorities and strategies, which we're trying to build out right now, we would need a bit more resources to do that effectively. I mean, this plan, even though we believe it is necessary and going to make a difference eventually, it is piecemeal.
Yes, Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, and this may be more operational, I suspect, than actually capital, but in here you've got the replacement of water service connections in Duncan Place, which I'm assuming that Douglas and Davis will also be in there included. We've sort of been given forewarning as a council. Those are also on the radar. So when you say water service connections, is it only to the curb stop that we're doing? Because typically, anything past the curb stop to the residents has been the residents' responsibility.
Fair point. We have to make sure, we do believe it's from the curb stop to the house, but there is a potential, and Adrian, you might know if we think that copper goes off the main as well to the curb stop. But in this, we're not envisioning billing property owners for this. The infrastructure is only 30 years old, so it is a special thing. And given that it is buried, not the standard 7 or 8 feet, but sometimes up to 15 feet, it's going to be an exorbitant cost. For Duncan Place alone, we're estimating, I believe, $800,000 for that one street to replace the service connections. We are trying to get better detection technology first to confirm it, but given the other replacements we've done, I think the last one was 2015 or 2016, and then the emergent leaks we found on all those cul-de-sac areas, we're fairly confident it needs to happen. But to build the residents of, Davis, Duncan, Douglas, it's going to be exorbitant. I mean, Davis might have 20 homes on it, 25. And you do the math. It really was an engineering mistake, essentially, a design guideline mistake 3 decades ago. So it's unfortunately fixing the errors of the past with inflation built into it.
Well, thank you for that, because that's kind of the clarification I was looking for, because when you purchase a home, you really have no idea what's in the ground.
I think we have gone our round on the water loss and I&I, so we'll move forward.
Thank you. So next up, we have our Parks and Recreation. So we have our manager of Parks and Rec, Ken Kruger, here, and our first, so I'll ask him to come up. Our next project on here is the wall mount lift at the Aquatic Center.
Good. So this is the wall mount lift at the change room at the pool. Currently, we have an accessible change room. It does have one lift for the change table, but it does not have a lift over the bathroom. We had a specific request from a family that has an accessible son. So there is no lift over the toilet, so this is to help with that. So they can go from the wheelchair to the toilet and back. And then we also have the mechanical portable lift in need of upgrade as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I would open to questions. I would think that in this day and age that we would secure a mobile unit as a wall mount for all users, actually, that are in the situation. But if there's any further questions? Thank you very much for your time.
He doesn't get to leave quite yet.
We have a few items on the
Yeah.
docket.
And next up, we have our fleet replacement program, and this one is specific to parks for this year.
So yes, just in our vehicle fleet, we have currently about 6 vehicles that we have in our fleet. Most of them are of 15 years of plus age. So we do have one that's currently out and down and has pending $5,000 to $10,000 in repairs. So we're looking to try and kind of get caught up and replace one of these vehicles this year anyways. And another issue is we have, most of our fleet is just single cab. This would be a quad cab that we'd be purchasing and fielding people around. One of the issues we have with our service change that we did with the mowing, going to bi-weekly mowing, we now have a week of where we're able to now send out people to whip, but we don't have any vehicles to get them around, so.
I'd open the floor if council has any further questions. Thank you. Move on.
And the next item on here is a steamer.
So this is the weed steamer that we've been using for the past, I think there was a pilot project and then we used it last year. We currently rent the unit. The payment on the rental is approximately $15,000 for the short-term rental. If we purchase it for 30, our cost recovery is going to be done in 2 years. We find it has been a vital tool in fighting weeds, and it is done environmentally. So we believe that it's a key tool in our weed program. So thus, we are looking to purchase it.
Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I have just a question with regards to how long do we rent it for? Is this like is it an annual lease for it?
Seasonal, so you basically rent it from May to August.
May to August, so purchasing it would allow us to use it for a longer period of time?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And I just have one other question, if that's okay.
Yep.
And that would be, I'm just wondering where we're using it. Is it in specific areas, or are we using it in our flower beds or in
Yep.
boulevards or whereabouts?
It everywhere, wherever the most, we have all these trail planting beds. Been trying to tackle those, but also all the kind of the key eyeball ones as well along boulevards. So it can be used. It's portable. It's in the back of a truck, so can be used pretty much everywhere. It's not limited to a certain site or anything. We're trying to kind of get on top of. We seem to have quite a large inventory of landscape beds. Probably too many. We'll address that down the road, but currently, it's a kind of a good tool to have.
Thank you. Before I move to Councillor Blatz, I would ask, we've talked about steamers for weeding in the past. Are they really truly that effective? Do they really?
It's another, it limits the amount of manpower you need, so you can save costs on manpower. It's something that you need to kind of do on a regular basis. It's just not a one-time, so you're going into that site maybe an additional 2 or 3 times within a given year to be able to keep up. But it's just, it kind of helps out with the lack of manpower we have to do any mechanical.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blatz.
Thank you for that, and I actually did watch it in being utilized in the last couple of summers on some of the trails that I walk along, and it has been effective for certain. And this perhaps maybe is, again, operational type question, but we've had a lot of complaints about the boulevards or the medians along the highway where weeds come up. That is Alberta Transportation, but can it be used on those as well?
Yes, it can be used on hard surfaces.
Perfect. Councillor Ryan.
I just have one question with regards to the life cycle. So we've had it for 2 years, and how long do you expect it to operate for? Like,
The life expectancy is like 5 to 7 years.
Good. That's a good to hear. Okay, no further questions. Move forward, please.
Next item we have on here is the tow-behind gang mower.
So this is kind of part and parcel to kind of some other key equipment. Currently, we have a fairly large mowing equipment that is only used for seasonal. So you'll see it in the coming operational, but also in the capital. We're trying to utilize and change some of our equipment, especially with our mowing equipment. We have 9 pieces of equipment that are just seasonal. And we do feel that we have some equipment that is in need of year-round, and so this is going to be part and parcel to help us make that transition. We are looking to transition one of the wide area mowers to a tractor with a cab that'll come out of operations, and so we'll be able to still use a capacity as a mowing unit. We would have to have a 3-point hitch tow gang mower, which is this. That would be towed by the tractor with the cab, then we would be able to use the cab year-round.
Thank you. I'm intrigued by the name gang mower. Is there a purpose and reason they call
It's
it
just
gang?
because it's more than one,
Okay.
they call it a gang.
Okay, I get it. It's-
So it's 5 actual individual
Wow.
mowing units.
Okay.
And a tow behind unit.
Any further questions? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dole. I just have a question with regards to the leasing this equipment instead. I see that this is for a new leased tractor. Could we not lease these pieces that you need, or is that just cost prohibitive?
Typically, a piece of utility equipment is not leased. It's like it would be a version of, like, say, you have a blower attachment or a cultivation attachment or, snow blade. That stuff can't be leased, so.
Thank you. I see nothing further, so we'll move forward.
The next item we have is a purchase tractor.
So again, we're trying to kind of catch up and utilize our equipment to be more full-time functional year-round. We do have currently a 16-year-old tractor with no cab that we just use for seasonal, typically out on the sports fields. So we would like to replace that with a cab, and it also has a snow blower included in this cost. One of our new features is our new outdoor rink. There was no compensation to having any equipment used on it, so this tractor and the snow blower will be used to keep the outdoor rink maintained, because there was no, we don't have any extra pieces of equipment to maintain it, so.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dole. I was just wondering with regards to this unit for the snow blowing portion of it, could it be used to snow clear in other areas? We're just talking about the outdoor rink, but does it have more versatility than that?
Oh, yes, for sure. I just mentioned the outdoor rink, but we would utilize it in other areas when we're not using the rink, so.
Okay, that answers the questions. Director Lindeman, move forward.
So moving on now to sports fields, we have a rollout sprinkler.
So this is, we call it a rollout sprinkler. It's just really above irrigation. We have our old soccer field that there was no contingency plan on maintenance for it. I believe there might have been at one point in time a building going on top of it, so there was no plan to do anything with the field itself. We find that it probably gets more use with the little guys than it does the other soccer fields, so we would like to kind of increase the maintenance on it. This includes irrigation. So basically this is just a above ground irrigation that just we tied into the existing system, and then it's automatic, so it just self-propels itself across the field. So we're looking to try and invest with some overseeding and top dressing to bring the standard up with that field so that it's safe to use. And this would be kind of a key component to being able to do those things.
That's good information. Any questions? Councillor Blatz?
Thank you. So assuming then, you just mentioned the old soccer field only, but it could be utilized anywhere that we have.
Correct. We could then eventually, if we have services tied into, hedges or any other fields that we have, so.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Before we go forward to Councillor Wilson, for the sake of the viewers as well, can you share where the old soccer field is now that we have Rotary Park and all the new fields and everything? They may be wondering.
It would be the one that's closest to the parking lot. So we have the two outer fields that are main field, and then the one that's closest to the washroom is basically just an open area, but it's pretty much where all the little guys go to practice.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, at Rotary. So at times there's like 200 kids on that field, and that was not part of the original construction and renovations.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dawn. Just through you to Ken, just in my naive, ignorant world, when I think of irrigation, I think of the big farm fields. Can you give me kind of a little bit of a description of what this thing looks like, how easily, you mentioned it can be moved and transferred to other locations? How would we do that, on a flat deck or? And
No,
what about-
it's all it's like a little tow-behind unit. It's basically a large version of a water wheel. So the hose is rolled up on the water wheel like a drum. And then basically you stretch that out, and then mechanically it pulls itself back in while it's attached to the irrigation system. So it's just like a large overhead water wheel. And thus you can tow it to other areas. I've used it in other municipalities, so we towed it around to several different fields to be able to utilize it. We can also, you can hook it into a hydrant. You don't need to have permanent irrigation set up, so.
Very good. Was there further questions? Are you asking a question, Deputy Mayor? Okay, thank you. Just checking. Okay, we're ready to move forward.
Okay, so we're down to our last project here, which is a continuation of our sports field revitalization.
So the aspect of this is to kind of take care of some aging infrastructure at OR Hedges, but it kind of really is the gamut of scope of Rotary, Hedges, Imperial, and DM, Deer Meadows. Rotary Park, I'll speak to, is although we have fairly new construction, we've had some issues with maintenance. There are issues with the infield. We would like to address those. And also, there is a large dependency on weekend garbage. We have summer students that do Saturday and Sunday weekend garbage patrol, and I would like to increase the in-grounds that we have to kind of mitigate not having to have that staff on weekends. I have just come from the city of Camrose, twice the size municipality. We did not do weekend garbage. It's something I think that it's straight overtime cost. I think these in-ground garbage cans for 1 point will last 10 to 15 years, and we will not be dependent on having to have that staff and overtime costs, which seem to be quite high here. But as far as Hedges itself, another aging, infrastructure, fencing issues, bleachers, kind of the bleachers themselves, the dugouts, they're all kind of in midst of disrepair. So we would take, one of the fields and look to, fix all the issues with that. So it's kind of, we're trying to, we're grouping everything together. It's not just one specific thing, but it's kind of a collection of maintenance issues that we need to address. It's something that is a 3 to 5 year program that we're not taking care of under operations. So
You say disrepair. Can you clarify, is disrepair meaning safety issues?
yeah, there is fencing issues. We have there's like rot in some of the fencing. As far as just safety itself is just, disrepair of, something could get hurt, so.
Thank you for sharing that. Any further comments? Very good, and thank you very much, everybody around the table, and we'll move to, we're done? Okay.
So that's all the projects that are being proposed today, and I was just hoping that we could go back up to the top then and get just a little bit of a yay or nay from council on whether or not these should be presented, I guess, come December to the final budget approval. So
I might be able to ease your time there. As you said, go to the top of the list. We've all pretty well gone through it. And would it be easier to ask council if there's anything that is perhaps not a yay or nay that you would like to bring attention to? Deputy Mayor Cummings.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, just because somebody has to ask a question here, I want to go back to the I&I project, the $1.5 million project, the largest chunk of money that we've got here in our capital budget. It almost seems to me with the difficulties that we have, are we limiting this amount because this is all we can reasonably do in a year? Or to me, it just seems too little to tackle the problems that we've been presented with here with I&I and water loss. So the question is really is the 1.5, or if we add all the other projects together, they're the 1.6, is that a limit on what we believe we can actually do in a year? Or is it more of a, I don't want to shock council with a bigger dollar amount that we could use in fixing this problem?
Thanks for the question. It's not so much the shock value, it's just this is, we know that 1.5 million is the estimated cost for these projects. I think I mentioned in my introduction that there's a high chance we're going to have a budget amendment asked back to council, perhaps in March or April, and it revolves around that vapor testing repair sheet. We just don't have that built out yet enough to really debate it. We certainly are going to, we have started to tackle some already, but by spring we should have a better cost, and whether or not it can fit in here, I highly doubt it can. So I'm leaning towards the probability of having another request to council. I just don't know the dollar value of that. So the logic is that I know 1.5 million should be able to tackle what we have listed here, or what we want to do in 2024, but I didn't want to provide too much conjecture at this point. So.
Thank you. Excellent question as well. Continue on.
Thank you. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm wondering if it's possible, and the way our budgeting system is legally allowed to be done is to say, let's build in another $500,000 contingency fund, knowing that we are going to anticipate some further expenses. I'm a little leery on that because, again, we've got to pull money out of our butts that we're not budgeting for revenue sources for a budget adjustment. So right now we have an opportunity through the wholesome discussions and the complete budget analysis to, if necessary, increase our revenue sources to cover costs. If you're anticipating another $500,000 or more coming out from I&I analysis of the vapor testing, if we don't include it in our capital budget today as a contingency of some sort to do that, then we have no opportunity to build in a revenue generator for that expense here at the capital budget process or the budgeting process. When we bring it back in the spring or the fall and say we need an extra $500,000, we have to then massage everything to pull money from somewhere to pay for that. So I'm more inclined to see a contingency fund put in here that we can then look at the revenue side of our budget and budget for that today while we're doing this budget process, than pulling it out of the rabbit's hat or the magician's hat somewhere down the line.
And fair point. The difference with capital, there's no direct link to the taxation impact right now. Anything we bring back to council will be pulled from reserves. But your point is also well-founded that you don't have a clear picture, just understanding there's probably going to be another ask. So it's something council has to be comfortable with come operating budget time. If you want to fund that directly through a direct levy, for example. And it's not very common just because it's such a large single number that it's really difficult to get that revenue, and not to harp back to what should be or could be, but that's where like asset management and capital reserve policy transfers ought to really be in place of that instead of taking from taxes $500,000 to fund an additional I&I project, there ought to be that $100,000 transfer per annum towards this, even when you don't spend it. But obviously we're too far gone for that. So it really is council's preference, though, come operating budget time, if you think you need to buttress the revenue to fund these projects that will be coming.
Thank you for the conversation and dialogue. Councillor Ryan?
Well, thank you, Mayor Dolan, through you to CEO Williams. It certainly harkens back to my question earlier with regards to the spending of the 1.5 million, if we're, it's just a tip of the iceberg almost, and how much value we're getting out of that. But I do concur with Councillor Cummings with regards to looking at, how much it will cover, how much cost we're going to be looking at with regards to fixing all of those problems that were identified through the vapor testing. Certainly, they all need to be addressed at some point or another. Whether or not we need to address it all in 1 year or over several, a couple of years, I wouldn't want to extend it over several, too far out, because obviously every time we extend it, we're still going to have that $2 million loss. I would like to see on this budget, though, on the capital budget, an extension to the 2025, the 2026 giving us an idea going forward. Are we looking at 1.5 every year? Are we going to look at, 2.5 the next year? What kind of really costs are we looking at? Because that would give us an idea of capital projects going forward in the future, and what we actually can do and can't do. So I would like to see that be extended down further on the 2025, 2026, if possible. But I do have concern about whether or not we're accurately covering all the things that we really need to cover in that 1.5 that are low-hanging fruit or high-risk areas that we need to do work on right away that were identified through the vapor testing. So
I concur with the comments around the table with my colleague councillors, and I do feel that our CAO has that projected in some of the areas that he's hoping to bring back to us. But I'm certainly he'll answer. Did you have a question? We'll go with Councillor Daly and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. And I'd just like to comment on this that I appreciate the work that the administration has put into coming up with a 1.5 number, in that a lot of what we're seeing or not seeing underground utilities is that we don't know what we're up against. And so I think of this money as an investigational step that we're doing to find and to rectify some of the low-hanging fruit that has been mentioned earlier, as well as I'm sure once we get, so to speak, into the ground, we'll have a better idea of what 2025 and 2026 is. And up to this point, we have been kept up to date, and we've been very appreciative of that information as well, so that we know what's coming down and what your discoveries will be going forward. So looking at putting another 500,000 onto this, I don't really think that this is the time to do that. Maybe later on in the spring or the summer, once we figure out what direction we need to head in, and we do a one-time look at a plan and build out into the future, into those next 2-3 years. I agree with you, Councillor Ryan, that we should have some sort of expectation going forward as far as phases in this, or a plan going forward. But I think right now, we don't know what that plan's going to look like. So right now, I feel the 1.5 is very adequate for now, and then let's do it right later on in the spring.
Thank you for that, Councillor Daly, and we'll go to Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Blatt.
Thank you, Mayor Dolan. My brief comment is, and I think it was alluded to by the CAO off the top, is we can't tax our way out of a problem that has been many years in the making in terms of the I&I, and we all know around the table. I certainly understand and appreciate that 1.5 million in 2024 is certainly not going to be enough to fully address the issue. I concur with Councillor Daly in terms of this is investigative. This is hopefully some low-hanging fruit. This will move us in the right direction. We all know around the table a 1% increase typically generates $100,000 in tax revenue. And we have not yet seen the operating budget and all the implications and the asks there. So I do appreciate that having a projection going forward is certainly going to be helpful. But to also throw a cliche on the table, the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And I'm fine with this amount and leaving it with administration to take us forward.
Thank you. Counselor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I just a comment here too, that the onus is on us too as council to ensure that we start to do asset management, because this will help us to prepare for the future and any future capital asset we will need. And I think that needs to be one of our focuses and our priorities. And I concur with all councilors' comments, but especially with Councillor Wilson in the fact that we don't really know what's going to happen this year, and I'm fine with the budgeted amount. And if we need to make a budget adjustment, so be it. I'm sure we will see more coming forward as well at that point in time. So I think as council moves forward, we need to make our priorities straight and clear to administration, and the key element of this is asset management.
Thank you for that, and I trust our administration is working very hard on that as well. And we'll go with Councillor Walsh and back to Deputy Mayor Cummings.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Overall, I'm happy with the capital budget, the way it's been presented. I don't think I would change much of anything, but the I&I, it's an ongoing discussion. It has been for years. It will not go away. We will be doing it every year. I think the discussion that council needs to really start talking about water loss. Are you happy with 30%, 20%, 5%? Lower the percentage, the higher the cost gets. It's just, that's a discussion that's been going for ever since the town's been here. But I am happy with the 1.5. That's a good start. It looks at pretty well, it gives staff the ability to really, really dig into it. In past budgets, we talked 250,000, maybe even 5, but it's never really been looked at in any depth that I remember. So I am happy with this start.
Thank you, and we will now go back to Deputy Mayor Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm more comfortable after hearing the discussion that we're hearing today, especially from the CAO, that hopefully we'll see in the operation budget, which we haven't been presented yet, an increase in transfers to reserves specifically for I&I maintenance going down the line, so that we're assured that there is some revenue to be spent on an anticipated expense, because revenue expense balancing is important in our budgeting system. So I'm happy that if that's the way we're going to go, it's going to create that balance as an overall budget picture and not necessarily just within the capital budget program. So I'll agree with most of the other councillors here that I have no other questions or concerns with any of the other issues that were brought up in the capital budget procedure, and I'm hoping to look forward to the operational budget concerns for that.
Thank you very much, Council. You've been heard, and I believe our administration has heard that there is a consensus with this. I'll leave it with you to move forward. And thank you for all of you who have viewed with us, and thank you for the media for being here. But we will be moving into a closed portion of our agenda at this point to discuss Section 17 personnel. And who would you like? Just yourself? Okay, so we will clear the room, and we will just work with our CAOs. So I would ask council at this time for a motion, please, to move to closed. Yes, Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that council move to a closed session at 11:29 a.m. with council and the CEO remaining under
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We are now at the Rise and Report for our special meeting, and I will call on Councillor Blatz, please.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council accept the CAO update on personnel for information.
Thank you, Councillor Blatz. I now will call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried, and I will adjourn the meeting at 12:39 p.m. Thank you for your attendance.